So I've been working with businesses for 27 years, and one of the things that I see again and again are ways that businesses and business owners and CEOs self-sabotage their business. And I don't think they do it intentionally. I think it's just one of those things that they just do for many different reasons. And so I want to talk about that today. So we're going to talk about 5 ways you're self-sabotaging your business. So probably the most popular one that I've seen, and a lot of employees will know, some business owners may not get it or not, but the first one definitely is micromanaging. You know, a lot of my business owners and CEOs, they micromanage, and they do that for many different reasons. You know, probably the first reason they do that is because they're so used to doing it themselves, and they understand the outcome when they work on it by themselves. They just know if they do it, it's going to be right. If they give it to somebody else, they're going to have to go back in there and fix it. They're going to have to fix something, and that's just going to cost them time, and it's going to cost them money. So the problem is that when you micromanage, you're not trusting your team. And so what you want to do is you want to really just delegate that. You want to give it to your team, and then you want to mentor them and let them fail, you know. And I know it's going to cost time and money at first, but you have to let them fail. You have to they're just like kids, you know, you got to let them fail. You got to let them figure it out, because they can only get better. So if you really want to empower your team and let them grow, then yeah, delegate it. But then if you want things done a particular way, then provide good training. And so that is a way to mitigate that risk. So the other thing with micromanagers, the business owners, is they really need to figure out different ways of getting involved. If they're doing all the work, if they're micromanaging their employees, then they're not doing their job. They're not growing the business, and they're not scaling the business. They're not looking for new opportunities. So don't be a micromanager. So the next thing we want to talk about is avoiding difficult conversations. You see a lot of business owners or CEOs, and what ends up happening is they tend to, when there's some really rough issues or some decisions that make, or there's employee issues, sometimes what they end up doing is avoiding it, or they end up just not addressing it. That can also be with their high-level executive team. Mostly that tends to be around employee issues, or maybe there's some conflict with partners, or conflict with just sections of the business that they're just not addressing. And so when you do that, what ends up happening is these things fester over time. And so you have to get in there and have those difficult conversations. It's fine if you don't address them immediately. Obviously, if you want to think about how you're going to approach the situation, or if it's a critical issue that you just have to think through and plan, totally understandable. But if there is a trend of business owners and CEOs that don't have difficult conversations, and over time they just let them go, and it gets out of control, and they're just not paying attention, and then eventually they just forget, and then that just has a negative impact. So what you really want to do is give it some time. Let people around you know that if you have to process this, if you have to think of a solution, let them know that you're still dealing with this. Let them know that you're figuring out a solution for this, but you will get to them. It's okay if you have to take your time, but definitely let that person know that you're working on a solution. So that's how I would address basically neglecting strategic planning. That's actually not what we're gonna. That's neglecting strategic planning is what we're going to be talking about next. So so basically avoiding difficult conversations is what I was talking about before. Now we're going to talk about neglecting strategic planning, okay? Because it's on my list right here. So, look, strategic planning is one of the things that I do. And as a fractional COO, you have to be on top of it. And what ends up happening is when you don't have strategic planning, that you create a reactive environment. I've always said that, you know, when you're in a reactive environment, every day is a new day. You're just walking in, it's like that show 24. If the clock starts ticking and you're like, oh, you know, we're so crazy and it's chaos every day. That's a very reactive environment. That's a tough environment for your employees to work in. It's a tough environment for you to work in. So what ends up happening when you don't plan and you don't have a strategic plan, you're just here in the now. You're constantly dealing with what's happening day to day. And then you subject yourself to that. And so when you're reactive, in a proactive environment, when you plan, you can still handle the day-to-day stuff, but you know the goal that you're getting to. So that's a very proactive approach to business. And I try to explain to my CEOs and my business owners that when you work in that capacity, when you work in a proactive environment, man, it's like, oh, it's one of those things that you feel so good. You feel so amazing when things are just handled and hey, okay, something happened today and it's okay because, our plan is this and we're going to get there. So what do we have to do to all get towards that goal and that proactive approach? So that's one of the things I think that we tend to do as business owners, as CEOs. We basically are neglecting our strategic planning, and that really will hurt you and keep revisiting you along the way. I just talked to a colleague online, and he said that the universe will keep teaching you that lesson until you learn it. And I love that expression because, and I think I've heard that before, but until you figure out your strategic plan, until you put that in place, until you get all those goals in place, until you get all those KPIs in place, and you create that long-term solution for you, you're going to keep having the same mistakes over and over again. You're not going to find the right people. No one's going to do it your way. There's so many so many issues that come of that because you don't have a plan. So definitely when you want to focus on creating your strategic plan and creating a much more proactive environment instead of a reactive environment. So the fourth thing I want to talk about is overextending yourself. And that is very, very common, especially in small businesses. And what they want to do is they want to do everything themselves. And it's different than micromanaging. It's more of, well, I can do that, or yeah, I can do it. I know how that's done. I can do that. And then they take that on, or they take projects on, and you could have a team that can do it, but sometimes you're like, you know what? I don't want to burden them with that. I'll just do it. Well, again, what ends up happening is you keep taking on more stuff as the business owner and the CEO, and you can't get it all done. So other stuff breaks down, and things just start falling by the wayside. And then you get resentful, you get tired, you start making bad decisions. So you really have to start delegating. You really have to give that off to a team member, even if it's such a small thing. One of the things that I've been talking about lately, and I may do in another post, is having an executive assistant or just someone really close to you that can deal with some of these issues. So, look at that. That's my dog. That's great. So I think that's the thing with overextending yourself, is that you end up taking on too much. You get overburdened, you get resentful, you stop making good decisions, and you're making bad decisions. So the solution is to give it away, delegate that, get it taken care of, and really entrust your team to get the job done. And that's something that it's a challenge, but it's definitely one of those self-sabotaging kind of issues, self-sabotaging issues that CEOs and owners do for their business. And the last thing is fear of change. You see that business owners, typically what they'll do is they will be afraid of the change of how their business. They're very comfortable with how their business is going. And so that can be a lot of things. They're not keeping up with trends. They're not updating their team. They maybe have an outdated building, or they're not updating with new technology. They're not updating their products. They're not updating their processes. They're not updating their advertising or their marketing. And so that's one of those things that when that happens and you have this sort of fear of change, the fear of the unknown, eventually the company will just start to go down. Revenue will decrease, you'll lose good employees, And so you really want to build in processes where you can ride the trends. You want to build in processes that you keep up to date with what's going on. So that could be delegating people on your team. That could be hiring consultants to come in and tell you what the latest and greatest is. Doing routine audits to try to check how things are going. You guys are keeping up with the times. So the fifth one, fear of change and growing it big, or getting more revenue. Some people don't want to grow their company. Some people want to keep it small. But if you don't stay competitive, you will recede, and then you will lose money, and then the business will go under. So sometimes it's not necessarily about changing or growing bigger or creating more revenue. Sometimes it's just about keeping up. And so I think it's one of those things that you really have to look into. So fear of change is the fifth one. So just to recap, the number one thing, that's awesome. The number one thing about the 5 ways businesses are self-sabotaging are micromanaging. Good job, Jill. 2, basically avoiding difficult conversations. So that's a good one. Don't do that. Neglecting strategic planning. Okay, so do not neglect strategic planning. Be proactive, not reactive. Overextending yourself. Yeah, because when you overextend yourself, the business is just going to go down. Okay, and then fear of change. So really look at those 5 issues of the 5 ways that you're self-sabotaging your business, and lean into it. Figure out a solution, get your team involved. You don't have to come up with all these solutions yourself. If you have a consultant or you have consultants that can help you, get a hold of them and work with them. But you really have to kind of figure out and get past some of these issues. These are big issues. And when you figure these out, your business will dynamically improve. It will go up. So get a hold of these 5 issues. Don't let them impact your business, and keep growing.